Hey folks, I know you're going to see this probably individually because of the circumstances. When Des called me last night to let me know y'all going to be in 14 days of quarantine, I felt disheartened. But there are other ways to dealing with it, and we can't change the facts as they are. No different than poor Pepper in our story, which you're about to find out. Can't change her life either, other than look forward to seeing what the future holds. So I'm going to go ahead and read and record this week's reading that Des can share with you individually over the next week. And hopefully the days will pass by quickly. And if time permits, I'll go ahead and record next week's as well that Des will have, because I'm going to be away. I'm God willing, and if nothing unusual happens, my wife and I, Connie and I, will be traveling to visit family and be back in another 9 days. So I do hope to see and be with y'all again soon, but I'm suspecting that you may have to have a couple of weeks of this to go on to get the air cleaned, as they say. So I know Mr. Vic Young will take good care of y'all, and so will Kathy and all of the other nurses that are there taking good care of you. And a huge shout out to Miss Des for what she does. So with that in mind, I've got my copy of Purgatory. I pray that maybe you'll have yours while I'm reading this. We're going to begin on chapter 7, which is where we left off. And, we're into the story, and the Lightning Bug Festival is about to fall on everybody. And it's going to be kind of a sticky wicket, as the English would say, where Theo got thrown in the middle of having to write the articles about the 3 young ladies that are running for the Miss Shiloh pageant in the Lightning Bug Festival. And we know now that Zeb has bought a vehicle that he plans to shine up and fix up to be in the parade carrying the Miss Shiloh win person in her court once they have had their decisions made at the festival. So we're going to start again, page 47, chapter 7, and we'll read through the end of chapter 9. So Wednesday's Sentinel included a full-page color insert highlighting Friday and Saturday's festival schedule and listed the Miss Shiloh judges. Kay Abernathy, Shiloh High School principal; Dr. Arnie Wright, pastor of Shiloh Baptist Church; Barbara Patterson, co-owner of the Shiloh Motel and Bubba's Barbecue; and Dr. John Matson, the pastor of Shiloh Methodist Church. Mary not only cajoled them into serving as this year's judges, but had also kept their identities under wraps until this morning. Minutes after Liddy drove away for her last full workday before a well-deserved, albeit short-lived break, I prepared to leave the house to get my overdue haircut at Edward's barbershop. With an ocean blue, clear sky overhead the first day of June, I chose to wear khaki shorts, a red polo, and casual hiking sandals since I had no office visits planned. On the way out the front door, I grabbed my UGA safari hat and sunglasses from our wall-mounted coat rack. I knew if I arrived right after Wilson opened, my wait would be brief, though I planned to dawdle long enough to garner the latest buzz going around town. No different than when Wilson's grandfather ran the shop. Though many of the wilier patrons flipped through stained and dog-eared magazines that cluttered the waiting room, with few exceptions, everyone felt the obligation to insert their 2 cents about the latest goings-on in town. Whereas Adam's Feed and Hardware Store encouraged prolonged chatter over a rousing game of checkers, and more often than not, the ripest scuttlebutt became more urgent than the next strategic move, gossip mongering at Edward's barbershop, on the other hand, tended to slow the pace of each haircut. The fact is, Like many rural towns, wherever two or more folks gathered in any of Shiloh's establishments, you pretty much could be assured the latest juicy news came with an ample supply of opinions. Intent on getting my haircut, I ran into Mitch Johnson in front of Arian's Realty and Property Management, where he greeted me with a hearty smile, though his smile lingered as he inspected my exposed knobby knees. "Good morning, Mitch. Can I buy you a cup of coffee?" I gestured to the butcher shop. I had not been able to catch up with Mitch recently, and this seemed as good a time as any. 18 months had passed since Hal and the city council hired Mitch to reactivate the Shiloh Police Department. He appeared tireless in his efforts to make the most of the limited resources earmarked to support the town's three-person police force. While we waited for Bernie to bring us our two large to-go coffees, Mitch asked, "Are you taking the day off? You don't usually dress this casual around town." I removed my glasses and hat and finger-combed my must-grain light brown hair. My only plans today involve a haircut and harassing Zeb into a friendly game or two of checkers at his store. I pointed to the nearby table. "Well, if you've got a few minutes." Mitch smiled and grabbed his handheld radio. "Camille, I'm grabbing coffee at the butcher shop." He chose a seat facing the front of the restaurant. "Here you go, my two fine, handsome friends." Bernie placed our coffee on the table. "Can I get you anything else?" She pointed to the pastry behind the glass display on the counter. Mitch shook his head with a polite grin. I said, "No, thank you. Your pastries look mighty tempting for this old man, but I better pass." "You and Miss Liddy have any vacation plans this summer?" "Nah, we're sticking around town. Our two sons are bringing their families down for the Independence Day Jubilee, and after the rest of the family leaves, our two oldest grandsons will be staying with us for a couple of weeks. Besides, Liddy will be tied up with the school's art and music summer camp." "Sissy, what about your other grandkids?" Mitch asked. "Sorry, our 12-year-old granddaughter will be going to Camp Chippewa near Blue Ridge while the boys are here. The two youngest ones will be making sandcastles on Jekyll Island with their parents." I leaned back in my chair, sipped my coffee. "Yep, everyone's doing something exciting this summer, except me." Mitch nodded, smiling. "Aren't you going to enjoy hanging out with your grandsons while they're here?" "Oh, I reckon I'll get a pair of coveralls dirty pretending to be a farmer for the sake of my grandsons. Marie suggested I bring them out to her farm. My grandsons are city boys. I do plan to show them how to dig for worms and go fishing and catch crawdads in Shiloh Creek. Marie said she'll expose them to life outside of their electronic games." Mitch leaned to one side as his eyes darted to the door and then stood up. "Sit down, Mitch," Jeannie said with a sheepish look. "I only stopped in to buy a cup of coffee. I forgot to buy more coffee grounds for the office." Mitch slid a chair out. "Join us while you're waiting." Jeannie shook her head. "No, thanks. I need to get back. Don't let me interrupt your conversation. Miss Bernie's already poured a to-go cup for me." Mitch sat back down and smiled as Jeannie left. "Mitch, how's Tyler handling the graveyard shift for you?" I asked to regain Mitch's attention. "Tyler? Oh, yeah. Hawk's Mr. Gung-Ho. Of course, after the sun goes down, our town rolls up its sidewalks and stays pretty quiet anyway," Mitch said as he fingered the rim of his coffee cup. "Is that why you don't carry a gun?" Mitch reached for his handheld radio. "It's in my vehicle, and I hope I'll never have to use it." "For everyone's sake, I hope not as well. So tell me, does Camille like her new truck?" My inquiry sparked a cockeyed grin. "Lord have mercy, yes. And with Pete's old truck, that girl would give the Dukes of Hazzard a run for their money, and with her heavy foot." Funny, when I interviewed her last week, I struggled to get much more than a polite yes, sir, or no, sir. Mitch laughed. She does thrive in her introverted domain at the office. Most would go bonkers keeping busy without a lot of folks to chat with throughout the day, but not Camille. Even when I'm in the office, I hardly know she's at her desk unless the phone rings. Mind you, something tells me that she would be a real hellcat if someone ever got her dander up. Camille's voice came across the radio. Mitch, are you there? He grabbed his handheld. Yep, what's up? The mayor called and wanted you to stop by his office. 10-4. Tell Hillary I'll be there in 10. Mitch got up and clipped his radio back on his belt. Theo, we need to meet for coffee more often. I shook his hand. I'd like that. Oh yeah, one more quick question. What do you think about Camille's chances in the Miss Shiloh contest? Jeannie and Mandy aren't by any means wallflowers. Well, I really can't say, Mitch said with an arched brow. I ain't ever seen her without faded jeans and boots. Heck, she doesn't even wear makeup, and her glasses don't do her any justice either. Guess we'll both see whether Cinderella shows up Friday night. After dinner, Liddy occupied her cozy armchair with her feet stretched across her ottoman. I sat across from her, my reddened and once sun-starved legs propped up on my recliner's extended footrest. Our Tiffany reading lamp cast a soft amber glow on our bay window as darkness arrived, a tad tardier than the previous evening. Did you use that aloe cream like I told you after you showered? Liddy asked. I responded with a feeble, simpering nod. Theo Phillips, how many times do I have to remind you to use sunscreen, especially on those sexy but sun-deprived legs of yours? Our grandsons will be here in 1 month, and you're going to have to make sure they protect themselves too. I'd hate for them to waste any of their time with us nursing a nasty sunburn. Message received loud and clear, my darling. How did it go with John Priestley in his first day as the new vice principal, especially since Kay flew the coop for a few days? Liddy's eyes sparkled as she answered with a widening smile. Phoebe and I kind of enjoyed the fact that he kept busy settling into his new office across from Kay Abernathy's. When he made the morning PA announcements, applause and whistles filled the halls. Now, mind you, Andy paraded past my room headed to John's office at least 3 or 4 times throughout the day. Phoebe told me that Andy reminded her of Jesse Masterson's first day on campus. I hope everyone's expectations won't be influenced by Jesse's bronze image reminder on Town Square. Jesse Masterson can't be replaced. Besides, who can keep pace with a legacy that grows larger with each passing year? I said as I glanced at a copy of Jesse's story on my bookshelf. If I have any regret since we arrived here, capsulizing Jesse's heroic life in that darn book would be one of them. Liddy squirmed in her seat and hugged her knees. Why would you say such a thing? What you included in that book about Jesse helped Marie swap a mother's grief for a treasure trove of fond memories. Also, others who mourn Jesse's tragic death would agree that your portrayal of Jesse's life helped them too. Oh, I know you're right, but whenever Andy's name got brought up today around town, Jesse's got mentioned right along with it. Oh, fiddlesticks. John knows the weightiness of those expectations. He'll make sure Andy gets the kind of support he'll need to succeed, whether that includes a championship right away or not. Liddy climbed out of her cozy perch, walked over to me, and planted a big kiss on my cheek. Why don't you find us a movie and to watch while I perk some coffee? Liddy returned with 2 mugs and sat down on the opposite end of the sofa so I could rest my feet across her lap. While she rubbed more aloe on my legs, I scrolled for a suitable movie to watch on television. After she sipped on her coffee, she asked, "Any more news about Hank?" I shrugged and then asked, "Well, how about the quiet man?" Liddy slapped my sunburned shins. You and your John Wayne movies. At least this one doesn't have anyone getting shot at. Chapter 8. The flurry of activity along the streets bordering town square piqued Liddy's curiosity. City workers erected barricades at the intersections and hoisted lightning bug festival banners throughout town. Right after lunch, she pestered me to take a walk with her into the center of town to get a first-hand look at the festival preparations before the crowds filled the streets later that evening. At the corner of Broad Main, Liddy tugged on my hand and accelerated her pace. On the Aaron's Realty and Property Management door, Jeannie had posted a sign that read, "Closed for the festival." Next door, Silas examined the hustle and bustle around town square from his restaurant's doorway. "What do you think, Silas?" Liddy said as we stopped and observed the transformation of the city's flatbed trailer into the festival's main stage. City workers affixed the red, white, and blue skirting to hide the trailer's underside. Others anchored steel steps to the tail of the trailer near Jesse Masterson's bronze statue and convenient to a 10-by-10 white canvas enclosed canopy. At the opposite end of the stage, wires connected sound equipment stacked under another white canopy to the microphones and speakers on the stage. Silas shook his head. "Why is it, Miss Liddy, we make such a big fuss each year about such a little bug?" He then pointed to the street corners on both sides of town square. Traffic barriers now sealed off Adams and Broad streets from all vehicle traffic. With a sigh, Silas said, "And this year, since Bernie decided to give her niece a hand at the Emporium, I might as well close early too. Of course, we both will want to watch the Miss Shiloh contest tonight. Who knows? Mandy might win. I know that'd make Bernie very happy." Liddy squeezed Silas's hand. "Please tell Mandy we wish her good luck tonight." Liddy then dragged me to Adams Street, where Edwards Barber Shop and the other shops and businesses had long been closed. A carnival company filled the barricaded street with kiddie rides and game booths. Liddy particularly enjoyed the gigantic painted lightning bug with its blue illuminated tail perched atop a roped-off entrance to the children's rides and games. Food vendors were interspersed among the arts and craft vendors along Broad Street between City Hall, Shiloh Baptist Church, and the Shiloh Library. On both Main Street corners out front of town square sat two purple-painted post office boxes labeled, "Cast your ballots for Miss Shiloh here." By 5 o'clock, whiffs from the succulent vendor offerings and a cacophony of carnival noises coaxed us to walk the 2 blocks into the center of town. The giggles and laughter of children intermingled with the mechanical noises from kiddie rides as barkers cajoled young men to show off their skill for a chance to win a prize. Hillary and Mary sat behind a table in front of the festival's official tent, handing out extra copies of the Sentinel's full-color festival pullout. Along Main Street, folks unfolded chairs and spread out blankets to reserve their spots in anticipation of the 6 o'clock Miss Shiloh contest. Mitch Johnson talked with a sheriff deputy at the northern end of the blocked-off Main Street. At the opposite end of the traffic-free street, Tyler dangled his feet from the tailgate of his Shiloh police truck. He parked his patrol vehicle parallel to the traffic barrier and redirected traffic coming south on Main Street to the circuitous detour that took vehicles around the center of town. Liddy grabbed my hand as we weaved our way through the crowd and crossed Main Street to visit Hillary and Mary. "This turnout sure is crazy," Liddy said, standing in front of the table. Hillary looked up after she handed another stack of Miss Shiloh ballots to Mary. "Isn't this great? I can't remember such a huge crowd like this on Friday night. The bigger crowd usually turns out on Saturday's parade. If this is any indication, tomorrow's turnout should create a parking nightmare around here." She looked up to her apartment above the butcher shop and cackled. I just joked with Mary that I should sell tickets for folks to watch the parade from my living room window. Where's Hal hiding? I asked. He's still in his office, handing out last-minute instructions to Jeannie, Amanda, and Camille. They arrived a while ago and went in to get dressed for the pageant. After Mary instructed a young couple about where to cast their ballots later this evening, she said, I'm just glad we decided to hold off until tomorrow to announce the winner. It looks like it'll be a late night tallying the ballots. Want to lend a hand? I clutched Liddy's hand. I'm sure hungry. Let's grab a bite before the contest gets started. Chicken, Mary called out as we walked away laughing. Liddy looked back and said with a concocted apologetic pout, well, he'll be sound asleep by the time the festival shuts down this evening anyway. We found a seat atop the steps leading up to Shiloh Baptist Church's main entrance while we each munched on a deep-fried turkey leg. From our elevated vantage point, we could watch most of the activity that filled town square. Mr. and Mrs. P, why aren't you down there in the crowd? Pete Simmons asked. He stood on the sidewalk with Philip Archer and Jay and Jim Adams. I lifted my styrofoam cup of iced tea. Enjoying dinner. Caught taking another bite of her sandwich, Liddy swallowed and wiped her mouth. What about you four? What all y'all doing milling about? Hal just chased us out of City Hall, Philip said as Jay elbowed him. Now, why would Hal do that? Liddy asked, stiffening her back. Pete looked at Jim and Jay and said, just showing our support for this year's Miss Shiloh. I couldn't help but laugh as I added, and who might the next Miss Shiloh be? You know something all those folks down there don't know yet? Philip blurted, his sister, of course. Jay shoved Philip against Pete and said, what do you mean? Now hold your horses one cotton-picking minute. I thought you agreed that Mandy has just as much a chance as Jeannie this year. Jim stepped between Philip and Jay and draped his arms across their shoulders. He then looked up at Liddy. Now, this is why Hal asked us to leave. Unable to stop laughing, I said, would the four of you mind if the rest of us enjoy the suspense that's about to unfold in a few more minutes? I pointed to the City Hall portico. It appears Hal's about to get the show started. Come on, guys. Let's find a spot to watch from Main Street. Jay looked at Liddy and me. Y'all coming? Looks like it'll be a standing room only crowd in front of the stage. I glanced at Liddy and said, I think we'll watch and listen just fine from right here. At the first stroke of 6 on the City Hall clock, Kay Abernathy, Arnie Wright, Dr. Matson, and Barbara Patterson climbed the steps onto the stage and took their assigned places behind a crimson-draped table at the far end of the platform. Hal followed and stood at the podium. The PA system's feed of music faded as his microphone let out an ear-piercing squeal. The crowd whooped and whistled until Hal stepped away from the mic and held his hands high in the air. Thank you, thank you. We've got 3 young ladies eager to share a few minutes with you this evening. More whistles and cheers briefly interrupted Hal. After a pause, the crowd settled down as Hal continued. Before I introduce each of our beautiful contestants, I'd like to introduce our other very important guests this evening. While Hal introduced each of the 4 judges, my attention diverted to Mitch Johnson, engaged in conversation with a young woman wearing a floral embroidered denim dress. She appeared flustered as her arms flailed about as she spoke. Mitch listened, arms folded across his chest, occasionally nodding or shaking his head while the young lady continued to speak. Liddy yanked up my shirt sleeve. The girls are about to come out. Are you paying attention? Hold on one sec. Mitch appears to have his hands full with another young lady. When I looked again, Mitch walked up the sidewalk in our direction with the young woman one step behind. Liddy asked, Who's that girl? Mitch stopped and asked, Have y'all seen Gus Appleton anywhere this evening? Sorry, Mitch, I said. Mitch tendered a half-hearted smile. Miss Sarah says she's a family friend and just drove in from out of town. She figured she'd find him here since he wasn't at home. I got to my feet, craned my neck, and then pointed to the parking lot behind City Hall. I think you'll find him smoking a cigarette beside his old Lincoln. Liddy tugged on my pants leg as Mitch and the young lady walked away. Now sit down. I think Mitch can handle getting Miss Sarah and Gus together from here. Jeannie just walked onto the stage. Let's listen to Mary's introduction of the three contestants. Jeannie greeted the crowd as Mary described the yellow halter evening dress that Jeannie wore. Her light brown hair bounced on her shoulders. Amanda followed, wearing an all-white summer dress that set off her natural Mediterranean complexion and black hair. She wore a magnolia blossom in the white ribbon that secured her dark hair, which extended halfway down her back. The rowdiest oohs and ahs came when Camille appeared on the stage wearing a full-length red floral evening gown. Her pale auburn hair hung across her back in a loose French braid. I looked over to Liddy and whispered, "I think Cinderella showed up." Each contestant responded to why they should become Miss Shiloh. Jeannie took the microphone first. Having grown up right here in Shiloh, I recognize so many of your faces. I went to school with many of you. I'm proud to be considered once again for this honor. And if I earn your support this year to become Miss Shiloh, I will cherish every opportunity to represent our town throughout the year as Miss Shiloh. Amanda accepted the microphone next. Well, I can't say I recognize all your faces yet, but I can say I'm tickled to be up here tonight. Everyone I've gotten to meet since I moved into Shiloh and reopened the Elysium Emporium has been so supportive and kind. I kind of feel I already have won, just being invited to participate in this year's pageant. I want to say a special thanks to my Uncle Silas and Aunt Bernice for making this evening possible. Thank you, and please feel free to call me Mandy whenever you stop in at the store. Camille accepted the microphone from Mandy and stared at it for a couple of seconds before she raised her head with an uneasy look that also stymied her first words. Well, I ain't very good at giving speeches, or for that matter, standing in front of so many folks. Like Mandy, I don't know too many of y'all, and most of y'all don't know me real well either. I want to thank Miss Jeannie and Mandy for being so kind and helpful. Heck, they're far more comfortable wearing these fancy dresses and walking in these high heels than me. If all y'all vote to be your next Miss Shiloh, I'll do my very best to make all you good folks proud you chose me. As the three waved as they departed the stage, Mary reminded everyone to cast their ballot for who should be the next Miss Shiloh. The final decision would factor in the weighed votes of the four distinguished judges, along with all the popular votes cast that evening. Mary finished by saying, "Anyone needing a ballot, please stop by the official festival tent. Please place your ballots in either of the bright purple mailboxes just beyond the ends of the stage." Hal returned to the podium. We want to thank Mrs. Mary Simmons and all those who helped tonight. Please enjoy yourselves and the rest of the evening. We look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow for the festival parade at 11 o'clock when all will find out who will be this year's Miss Shiloh. Liddy stood and wiped off the backside of her jeans. Are you ready to head home for a cup of coffee and a slice of carrot cake? I think so. We can take in more of the festival tomorrow. Right now, coffee and cake sounds good to me. Before we crossed Main Street, I saw Pete next to Mary at the table in front of the festival tent. Jim, Jay, and Philip pestered Hal and Hillary behind the stage. Mitch Johnson walked among the dispersing crowd and appeared to head to the far side of Town Square, where the carnival rides continued to stir plenty of laughter and screams. The PA system boomed calliope music throughout downtown. Liddy looked up. to the second-floor window of the Arians building. "Theo, look up. Joe and Missy are waving." Liddy waved and giggled like a giddy schoolgirl. "Now I know why we didn't see Sam and Susanna Simmons tonight." I bet Sam arranged their vantage point to temper Susanna's proud mother exuberance for Jeannie, I chuckled. "Heading home?" John Priestley asked as he approached with his arm around Phoebe's waist. Liddy turned and said, "You want to join us for some coffee and cake?" Phoebe wrapped her arm around John's waist. "Thanks, Liddy. I think we're going to wander around before we call it a night." The street lamps flickered on as we left Main Street and strolled down Broad Street's sidewalk towards home. Liddy squeezed my hand, and when we heard Gus Appleton across the street beside a pale blue Buick sedan with Louisiana tags, talking with the young woman we'd seen with Mitch earlier in the evening. "Evening, Gus. We're glad your young friend found you," Liddy said with a cordial but inquiring inflection in her voice. Gus seemed startled as he turned. Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Phillips, enjoy your evening." He waved briefly and turned his attention back to Miss Sarah, who rubbed her eyes and shook her head ever so slowly. She appeared to avoid direct eye-to-eye contact with Gus or us. Not long after Liddy and I had finished off our carrot cake and sat down to relax on the porch, listening to the sounds of the festival, 2 cars pulled around the corner. The first pulled up alongside the curb, Gus's black, well-worn Lincoln. The other, the blue Buick we saw earlier, parked behind the Lincoln. We watched as Gus and the young lady walked up our walkway. "Mr. Phillips, I apologize for stopping by this late and unannounced, but I need your help," Gus said, fumbling for the right words. "What can we do for you, Gus? Or should I include Sarah?" I asked, eyeing Gus's nervous look. Sarah reached into her pocketbook and pulled out an envelope. Gus uttered as if he feared what I might say. "Mr. and Mrs. Phillips, I don't know where to bring her, but after you walked past the 2 of us earlier, I took it as a sign from heaven above." All 3 of us looked at Gus with raised brows. "Gus, what's wrong?" I asked. I stared at Sarah, clutching the envelope even tighter. Sarah tried to speak, but Gus spoke over her. "This young woman is Miss Sarah. Miss Sarah May Arnicourt, Dixie's daughter." Now, before we go to chapter 9, y'all remember what happened to Miss Dixie Arnicourt when we read Testament last time. So there's the bridge that's connecting this new young lady in Purgatory with Dixie, her mother, from Testament. Chapter 9. Sarah seemed to sense our awkwardness and reluctancy when she looked back at Gus after Liddy offered her a gracious smile and invited them into our living room. But Gus hesitated, more interested in his vehicle than accepting Liddy's invitation. I edged closer to Gus and whispered, "Does she know about Dixie?" Gus shook his head, and I nudged him across the threshold. Gus gnawed on his lower lip as Liddy pointed Sarah down to the hall to the bathroom. She then looked at both of us and said with one eye on the hallway, "When she explained who she was and why she showed up here, I didn't know how to tell her about Dixie. I'm still uncertain why she sought me out. I'm not sure what to say or do. She can't stay in my apartment." His desperate frown spoke volumes. "Gus, can I get you a cup of coffee?" Liddy asked as I sat down in my recliner opposite Gus, seated in Liddy's cozy armchair. Thank you, Miss Phillips. I guess a cup of strong black coffee would suit me," Gus replied, appearing unsettled in Liddy's plush armchair. The way he fidgeted, you'd have thought the seat cushion was carved of stone. He planted his feet square on the floor and stared at the ottoman that offered his knees a little wiggle room between it and the front of the chair. When Sarah reappeared, she dismissed Liddy's offer for coffee, but asked for iced water instead. She took a seat on the sofa, but seemed as uneasy as Gus. Her eyes danced from the magazines displayed on the top of our coffee table to the family pictures that spanned the mantel, and then she scanned our bookshelves. "And here you go, young lady. I've also got some carrot cake if you'd like." With a sheepish look, Sarah muttered, "That'd be nice. Thank you, ma'am." Bird-like, she took a sip of her water, looked to place the glass down on the coffee table, and hesitated until I climbed out of my chair and slid a coaster in front of her. After Liddy served Sarah and Gus, she sat on the opposite end of the sofa and glanced at Sarah. Liddy's "My, oh my," broke the silence that had deafened the room. "So you're Dixie Anacor's daughter." Sarah swiveled her hips to look at Liddy better. "Yes, ma'am. Do you know her?" Liddy's eyes darted at Gus and me with a look I knew well. The next words would come from my mouth, not hers. I scooted to the edge of my seat, stroked the corners of my mouth with my fingertips to buy a few seconds. Sarah's thirst for answers drew her focus to me as she stuttered, "What's wrong? What's happened to my mama? Where is she?" I felt compelled to stand, looked across the room at Sarah's wide-eyed stare, and put into words what she needed to hear. I glanced over at Gus, but he shrank further back into the chair as his head drooped. Liddy inched closer to Sarah, but her eyes encouraged me to respond. "Miss Sarah, there's no easy way to tell you. Your mama died in an accident over a year ago. You never knew, did you?" Sarah burst into tears. "No." "I'm dreadfully sorry we're the ones to break the news to you like this. My wife and I got to know her when she visited Shiloh, but she never mentioned anything about having a daughter." Liddy crept beside Sarah and draped her arm around her. Tears streamed down her cheeks, and as she moaned to herself, "I've got no one. Everyone's left me. I hate you, Mama. I hate you." Liddy stroked her shoulder. "What do you mean everyone's left you? Who's been taking care of you?" Sarah tilted her head to Liddy. "Maud was my father's mother, and she has raised me for as long as I can remember. She was more of a mother than that woman who bore me." The last words arrived harsh, brimmed with bitterness. I stepped closer and knelt down on one knee to capture her blank, tear-filled stare. "What happened to your Maud, if you don't mind me asking?" Her reddened eyes locked onto mine. "I buried her last week. Cancer took my Maud from me." "I'm genuinely sorry. So why did you come to Shiloh to find your mama?" Sarah retrieved the envelope from her pocketbook and handed it to me. "Is it okay if I read this?" Sarah nodded. The powder blue embossed stationery I pulled from the envelope identified Maud as Mrs. Matilda May Anacore, 2916 Levy Road, Vidalia, Louisiana, 71373. Though written with an unsteady hand, the indigo penned message originated from a loving heart. I read the letter out loud. "My darling Pepper, seeing as you are reading this, my body has surrendered to the battle I tried with all my might to win. I would have gladly embraced my prolonged suffering to see you graduate and take your first steps as the independent young lady I know you already are. I want you to know I have asked God to send his guardian angels to help you complete the task I could not. Please pray for my soul. There are sins from my past only the Heavenly Father can wipe away and free me from a prolonged stay among the throngs in purgatory. I believe with all my heart that your fervent prayers and God's eternal love will release me to watch over you myself in due course. There is a shoebox in my closet with your name on it. Inside you'll find a keepsake for you. Also, Father Aloysius knows my wishes for your care and has agreed to provide guardianship until you reach your 18th birthday. This is why I asked him to give you this letter in person upon my death. I have not heard any more from my mother since she wrote me from her hometown of Shiloh, Georgia. I suggest you locate Mr. Gus Appleton, attorney at law in Shiloh. If anyone knows how to contact your mother, he will. I pray Dixie might prove to be the mother you deserve. These words of wisdom have sustained me for many years. Cherish them, and may they guard you through the years to come, just as we do not understand the coming and going of the Spirit of life, nor how the bones are knitted together in the womb of a mother, so neither can we grasp the works of God, the maker of us all. Therefore, leave the past behind you, embrace each new day as if it is your last, and never claim ownership of tomorrow because it rests in God's hands. Please know I'll forever be waiting and watching. Maud. I refolded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope, filled with far more questions than answers. Gus stood, scratched his scraggly, peppered red beard. I'm sorry, Sarah. It's getting late. I got to work on finding a place for you to stay. The Shiloh Motel is most likely sold out due to the festival. His eyes bounced between Liddy and me. Liddy looked up at me, still attempting to console Sarah. Miss Sarah, or do you prefer Pepper? I asked. With a tight-lipped half-smile, she said, Pepper, thank you. Well, Pepper, Miss Liddy and I would be honored if you would mind staying right here. We've got 2 guest bedrooms upstairs, and you'd have your own bathroom. We'll even throw in breakfast in the morning. That'll give us more time to talk. No doubt you've got a lot more questions. Liddy patted Pepper's hand. Is there anyone you need to call or let know where you are? Pepper shook her head. I've got my stuff in the car. Can I help you with anything? I'm going to walk Gus out to his car anyway, I said, pointing to the door. Gus approached the front door but stopped and said, Miss Pepper Onacor, I believe your grandmother's prayer got answered. I'll stop by tomorrow. Good evening and thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Phillips. I don't know what time in the wee hours Liddy climbed into bed, but I remembered it was about midnight. She shooed me off to bed. The dawn's early light eased into my bedroom when I crawled out of the bed out of habit more than want or necessity. A few minutes later, I sipped on a piping hot mug of coffee and ventured onto the porch to fetch the paper. I took a seat in a rocker and savored my coffee when I realized my edition of the Sentinel did not lie at the foot of the steps. I surmised Tim must have had a late evening and my paper would arrive before long. Since he made his first delivery not long after we moved into this house, Tim had been late only a handful of times. The coffee began to set in as I contemplated Pepper's revelation from last night. I stared at her powder blue Buick parked out front, squeezed my eyes tight, and mumbled, God, I don't understand. Why did this girl, the daughter of a woman who almost killed my friends, and me no less, end up here? Why now? Lord, I'm not questioning your will or your ways, but I am asking for a little clarity. What should I say when she inquires about her mother's death? Isn't it bad enough that she lost her father in a suspicious drowning accident? She's still reeling inside from losing her grandmother Maud, the one person who evidently loved and cared for her. The news has bankrupted her emotions. Lord, please guide our hearts, souls, and minds as we try to help Pepper realize she's not alone. Please prepare Hal and Philip for the news about their half-sister. Oh, Lord, I almost forgot. And Hank, too. I know it wasn't by accident that she found her way here. Help us avoid what could become a train wreck for all concerned. Amen. The barking of neighborhood dogs signaled the paper's imminent arrival. I left my rocker to pour more coffee when a sleepy-eyed Pepper greeted me at the front door. And how long have you been up, young lady? Wearing a pair of jean shorts, a faded threadbare green t-shirt, and flip-flops, Pepper looked more like the freckled 16-year-old than she appeared at first last night, especially now with her long red hair braided into pigtails. Not too long, but I don't want to disturb you. You looked as though you were praying and talking to yourself. I'm getting some more coffee. There's also orange juice and milk in the fridge. What would you like? Pepper's dimples deepened. I'd like a little coffee, if that'd be okay. Miss Lydia and I stayed up until sometime after 1 o'clock. How do you like your coffee? A little milk with a spoonful of sugar, please. I pointed to the rockers. Go grab a seat. I'll be right back. A moment later, I handed her a mug of coffee just as Tim pedaled down Calvary Street, chucking papers. He stopped and straddled his bike as I waved and called his name. I looked at Pepper and said, Come on, I've got someone I'd like you to meet. She hesitated briefly, but placed her cup on the table between our rockers. Good morning, Mr. P. Sorry about being late this morning. Woogie, Bobo, and me kind of got lost track of time last night after the festival wrapped up. Tim reached out and handed me my morning edition and glanced at Pepper with an awkward but also curious smile. Excuse my manners, Tim. This is Pepper. She's visiting from Louisiana. Pepper, this is Tim. He's not only the best paper boy in the entire state of Georgia, he's also the quarterback of the Shiloh Saints. I'm not sure whose dimpled cheeks turned red the fastest. Tim nodded as he offered his hand. Nice to meet you, Pepper. Are you going to be staying here long? Pepper shook his hand before she looked at me and said with uncertainty, I'm not sure yet, at least a couple of days. Did you catch any of the festival last night? Tim asked. I didn't get a chance to see much of it by the time I got in last evening. Well, if and Mr. P doesn't mind, me and a couple of friends will be hanging around town square by the time the parade starts, if you'd like to join us, I mean. The distraction appeared to be a godsend and would allow Lydia and me a chance to get some advice before catching Hal and Philip at the right moment this afternoon. I glanced down at Pepper's eager, wide-eyed look. If Pepper wants to hang with you guys for a while this afternoon, I don't see why not. That is, if she wants to. Sure, sounds fun to me, Pepper said more to Tim than me. Tim, we plan to be on Main Street before the parade gets underway anyway. I'm sure we'll see you, I said as Tim put one foot on the pedal and ready to push off. As Tim rode off, he said, We'll be hanging around the barber shop. See you later. Pepper and I walked back to the porch. Pepper, trust me, you'll like Tim and Woogie and Bobo. They're pretty good, popular boys around town, and you won't have to worry. They'll make sure you have plenty of fun. Woogie? Bobo? No, those are odd names. I chuckled. Well, Woogie's real name is Keith. His dad owns the barber shop, and he's an exceptional football player, too. He'll likely wind up playing for some big-name college after he graduates. And Bobo, well, his real name is Byron, and he's Woogie's cousin. His father is one of the barbers, too. Bobo's going to college, but I'm not sure he'll play any football after he graduates. He's pretty smart, though, and should get an academic scholarship anyway. They sound pretty cool. I play basketball and soccer at my school. I don't think I'm good enough to play in college, but Maud always told me I was because most of the boys couldn't run as fast as me. I sipped on my coffee while I stared at her car. Let me guess, that's Maud's car. It don't look like the kind of car a young girl like you would prefer to drive. Pepper giggled. I've been driving that car since I was 15 because Maud couldn't drive herself any longer. I had to drive her across the Mississippi into Natchez, where we did most of our shopping and went to Sunday Mass. That's where I went to attend school. She stopped as though she ran out of words and then stared off into the distance. I started to speak but swallowed the last of my coffee instead. Pepper looked at me with her green eyes. Miss Liddy told me about what happened to my mama the day she died. Is it true that she almost shot you before she drove off? Her stone-cold look caused me to stop rocking. People can do some mighty strange and inexplicable things when they allow their mistakes to overtake them. Who was Hank, the man Mama shot? I then realized Liddy had not told her Hank was her oldest half-brother. You'll get to meet him in a couple of days if you'd like. He's been away for the last few months, but he's on his way back home. Let's just say, if it weren't for Hank and a courageous dog named Ringo, I might not be standing here with you. Oh, I hope to meet Hank. I'm glad he's okay. I feel I should say something to him. I know my mama could be pretty mean, but kill someone? Pepper shook her head. The storm door opened and Liddy asked, Who wants some breakfast? I'm about to whip up some eggs and bacon and biscuits. Well, how about we all pitch in? Do you like to cook, Miss Pepper? Pepper responded with a cheery nod. And we'll kind of cut things off right there and then before we get into chapter 10, obviously, on a follow-up. So listen, y'all enjoy. If you get a chance to reread it or have someone reread any part of these 3 chapters, and continue to enjoy the story as you're getting introduced to Pepper, who plays a very key role in the story, and waiting to see how Hal and Philip and, God forbid, Hank responds to Pepper being their newfound half-sister, and see how that plays out. So God bless. Y'all stay safe. I know you're not enjoying being quarantined in your room, but it's for your best health. Keep a smile on your face. Keep a good stiff upper lip. And I'll see you soon. God bless.